Hi, this is Brian Brady with Youth Engage, doing a special interview in this very difficult week with Superintendent Michael Matsuda of Anaheim Union High School District. Superintendent, I asked you to come on today because this has been one of the harder weeks in memory for educators, for students, for the whole country after the Texas shooting that killed 19 school children, fourth graders, and two teachers. Been very emotional, and I wanted to hear you've been in this educational profession for a long time, and you've been leading your district for 8 years. I wanted to get your thoughts on the situation. First, how did you take this in, and how are you processing it?
I don't think anybody can ever get used to the horror of this type of tragedy with our young people. Yeah, obviously our hearts go out to the victims. I was reading about them, these young 10-year-olds um, and their families, and even the two teachers who died too. But also the victim is the perpetrator. These are young, generally boys, 17, 18 years old as well. And ultimately, we're all victims of this. And these horrific times of violence. And as our country was focused on the horrors of the Russians and the Ukrainians, the mirror is now on us as an American society.
What actions? I think there's a lot of helplessness that people feel at this point, and I think teachers feel a sense of helplessness too. How do you your job is to kind of inspire and unify. How are you trying to do that in this difficult time? I know it's graduation week, so there's some that helps a bit because there's some celebrating going on too.
Well, I think drawing strength from our young people themselves, our student trustee who sits at the dais, we do have a moment of silence at every board meeting. And 2 weeks ago, his moment of silence was about the celebration of graduation. And there is so much to celebrate for our young graduates. But he reminded us of those who were not there. And he spoke about this type of violence across the United States. And he encouraged us to take a moment of silence to think about those who are not there celebrating their lives and their graduation. And he ended with a sense of hope, though, because there is a lot of positive love and energy and healing. And I take my strength from young people like Abdullah, who shared his concerns about this senseless violence and trying to make sense of it and trying to heal. Another young person I wrote about in my letter to the entire district, it's a senior from one of our high schools who wrote about the pandemic in general and the healing and sort of this existential crisis that young people are in, but having the resilience to continue to go forward. And I think with all of our young people, the message is ultimately about love and kindness.
You have compassion as one of your core principles for teaching and learning. How do you build a compassionate culture within schools? And you mentioned the boys, some of these boys in our society getting lost and going down these dark rabbit holes. What do you advise about building this culture that creates belonging for everybody?
Well, there is a problem in this country with toxic masculinity. There have been 180 mass shootings, only 4 by women. There is a problem with gun violence and access to these automatic weapons. 25% of these mass shootings have been by those who used automatic weapons, 25%, as opposed to murders in general, about 1% of automatic weapons. So we do know this pattern of toxic masculinity, hatred beginning with self-hatred, right? There's no question that there's a lot of self-hatred and fear, and as these young, mostly boys, are trying to make sense of their place in the world, they're finding that they don't belong, and they get pushed out. We have a problem with the school to prison pipeline in this country, and we have practices that tend to push marginalized kids out, mostly boys of color. So I do believe that we need to build a more inclusive culture in our schools where kids find that they have a voice and they have agency. I think that, and they have a place that they can be heard. Now, they might disagree on solutions to problems, but also they need to be taught how to disagree, how to respect each other, and not devolve to hatred. But I do think the core of it is a deep-rooted self-hatred, self-shaming, and a culture that sort of reinforces shame and otherness in our society that we have to deal with.
Last question for you. Any message as a superintendent, you have to kind of keep your focus right on the schools, but do you have a message for the political leaders in your state or your country on how they can help you protect your kids?
Well, I think the general public is tired of talk, and people are looking for our political leaders to take action. To me, it's kind of like the research has shown. I mean, back to smoking causes cancer, right? Easy access to automatic weapons mixed with a lot of hatred in society is going to lead to these types of mass shootings. And I think there's a lot of fingers to be pointed, but with our politicians, they need to have the courage to come together in a bipartisan way to help legislate some sort of common sense gun control regarding automatic weapons and access to these weapons. So, and then it's incumbent on schools to continue to try to build a more inclusive school culture of respect, of kindness, of love, and compassion.
Well, thanks for taking a little time on a busy week. It's helpful to hear a veteran leader's ideas on what to do during this difficult time, and hope you can have a relaxed day weekend, and look forward to talking to you again.
Thank you, Brian.
Thanks.